without much ado, we have a speaker today, Zane Carpenter, and he's talking about Khrushchevite revisionism and its continuing effect on the international working class movement. And after that, there will be a discussion. You'll have a chance to say whatever you wish. But we give you our apology in advance. At the latest, 4:20 we have to leave to get our train to London. And not all of us, me and the cameraman that we've got here, are going to leave at 4:20. Thank you so much.
Right, well, we'll try and have it sorted by then. Right, good afternoon, comrades. Nice to be here in Glasgow. Nice to meet you all. Lots of new people. Right, this presentation, it's not only about Khrushchevite revisionism and the immense harm it has done, it's about the harm that it's still doing to the international communist movement and therefore to the cause of working class emancipation. Khrushchevite revisionism led not just to the collapse of the Soviet Union and the people's democracies of Eastern and Central Europe, but divided communists everywhere, with most of those who took the Khrushchev line falling into the vile revisionism, while a good many of those who opposed it ended up taking, if only for a short while in the majority of cases, an incorrect position of labelling the Soviet Union as social imperialist. The distinct tendency that we call Khrushchevite revisionism, although existing semi-secretly in the shadows for many years prior, first showed itself to the world as something tangible and organised in 1956, 3 years after the death of Stalin, when the Communist Party of the Soviet Union held its 20th Congress. This Congress is noted for two things. First, for Khrushchev's vitriolic attack on Joseph Stalin, and secondly, for putting forward certain fundamental propositions which run counter to the basic tenets of Marxism-Leninism. Both of these things are very much connected. That Khrushchev may have hated Stalin on a personal level is not of any real importance to us. What is really important is what Stalin stood for, and that's what had to be negated by revisionism before it could get on with the job of restoring capitalism. The attack that was made at this Congress on the theory and practical application of the teachings of Marx and Lenin, on the triumphs of the Soviet Union, on communism by attacking and blackening the name of Stalin, was not made at an open session of the Congress, but at a closed session, in what has come to be called the secret speech, which Khrushchev delivered just a week after the official report in which he had praised Stalin to the heights with weasel words designed to shield his real intentions from the Soviet people. All the powers of imperialism greeted his secret speech with great warmth and thunderous applause, recognising that this was the tip of a lethal dagger pointed at the heart of communism, the Soviet Union. The secret speech, up to the time of the collapse of the Soviet Union, was never published by the CPSU in the Soviet Union. It was handed over by some dubious link to the US State Department, and the State Department, through Columbia University, various other institutions, and the whole yellow press, saw to it that it was widely distributed all over the globe. The Soviet people would only hear rumours about what was in this particular report, although even these rumours led to a tremendous amount of strife in the Soviet Union. Riots and strikes in factories, turmoil in cinema halls when they heard what Khrushchev was saying. Stalin was attacked by the revisionists headed by Khrushchev as a madman who exercised the cult of the personality. They said he suffered from excessive vanity, that he knew nothing about agriculture, and this from Khrushchev, who was to wreck the Soviet agriculture in the years to come. That he only knew about agriculture from watching films and looking at maps, that he was out of touch with the people, that all he wanted was for everyone to obey him, and that he instituted such excessive forms of dictatorial rule that there was violation of socialist law in the country, and so the list runs on. People may ask, why did Khrushchev attack Stalin so much? Why did the bourgeoisie greet this attack with such enthusiasm? The answer was that Stalin was someone who had defended Marxism-Leninism, who had fought against all the saboteurs and wreckers in the Soviet Union, who had been able to lead the struggle for industrialisation of the country in the teeth of the opposition from imperialism and its henchmen within the Soviet Union, including leading figures in the CPSU, who had been able, and he had been able successfully to complete the campaigns for the collectivization of agriculture, and it was under his leadership that the mighty Soviet defence capacity had been installed and built up, both in the form of the equipment industry as well as in the form of the Red Navy, Air Force and Army, which were to go on and prove their mettle against the Nazi fascist invaders. And under his guidance, a tremendous scientific and cultural network had been built up, so that a very primitive people, the Russian people and the people of the former Tsarist colonies, were in a very short time turned into a literate and cultured people. Illiteracy had been something like 80% in Tsarist Russia, so they enjoyed a relatively prosperous and cultured life, free of the ravages of unemployment, homelessness and hunger, which was prevalent even in the richest countries during the Great Depression, which was started in 1929 and didn't really end until the closing of the Second World War. The Soviet Union stood as a beacon of prosperity. Stalin, as the leader of that party, which had made such accomplishments possible, was quite rightly honoured and revered, not only in the Soviet Union, but all over the world. Working people and peasants worldwide looked at Joseph Stalin and said, "This is our comrade, our friend, our leader." That was their attitude. I don't think there's anybody in the world, and that includes Marx, Engels and Lenin, who enjoyed that kind of prestige. That isn't to say that he was better than Marx, Engels and Lenin, it's just that he lived at such a titanic time that he was able to time and time again thwart the schemes of imperialism aimed at the Soviet people as well as some others. Such had been his contribution such had been the contribution of the Soviet Union in defeating Hitlerite Germany, that the Soviet Union was rightly regarded as the leader of that fight. Of course, other people fought in the war. The peoples of all Europe, of Asia, the Middle East, Africa and the Americas fought and made tremendous contributions. However, there is no question that the Soviet Union and its armed forces, with Stalin at their head, played the leading role in that fight against fascism. They were quite rightly respected, and after the Second World War, the prestige of the Soviet Union and of Stalin stood exceptionally high. All that had to be undone. In order to undo the achievements of socialism, something had to be done to bring down Stalin, and bring him down very drastically. When in the 1960s the Chinese communists criticised Khrushchevite revisionism, they correctly pointed out that the revisionists in attacking Stalin had not just attacked Stalin as a person, they had defamed the CPSU, the dictatorship of the proletariat, the achievements of socialist construction and industrialisation, demeaned the victories of the Soviet people against Nazi fascism, and also defamed the achievements of the Soviet Union in fighting against imperialism and giving fraternal support to the national revolutionary movements. The Khrushchevites, for their part, had no option. If they wanted to reintroduce capitalism to the Soviet Union, they had to carry on the attacks on Stalin, to try and separate him in people's minds from the CPSU and the achievements of the Soviet state. And the terminology of Khrushchev and his ilk became the terminology of every bourgeois and petty bourgeois, every paid gutter press hack who liberally sprinkled their poisoned words into their countless articles in the yellow press of imperialism. Khrushchev was always ready to portray Stalin as paranoid, a dictator, a fool, a madman, and maybe even convinced himself this was true. But the imperialists who copied his words, who applauded these descriptions and used them endlessly to justify all manner of dirty tricks, had never thought of Stalin as a fool. Even C.P. Snow, no friend of the Stalin or communism, had said that Stalin could put Roosevelt and Churchill into his pocket and they wouldn't have noticed. Such was his intelligence, his political knowledge and understanding. It was not, of course, only the out-and-out imperialists who were in raptures at the words of Khrushchev. The followers of Trotsky, the agents of imperialism in the midst of the working class, claimed the words of Khrushchev implicitly endorsed the correct stance of their despicable leader, calling at various times for a monument to be built in Moscow to the victims of Stalinism, upon which the name of Trotsky should be written in letters of gold. If only that was all that had happened. The Khrushchevite traitors did far worse. A silly monument based on obvious lies could easily have been pulled down.